Now, there are just days to go before the BRICS leaders meeting takes place in the Chinese coastal city of Xiamen. We're bringing you special coverage on the summit. The meeting is set to focus on promoting economic and trade cooperation between member nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce says trade accounted for only 16% of BRICS economies last year. This indicates there's great potential for growth. Two engines are driving multilateral trade: e-commerce and services. Developing guidelines for e-commerce while opposing protectionism will benefit the BRICS mechanism. China will also focus on building airports and strengthening customs clearance among BRICS countries. Let's get you more now on that story. I'm joined live from Xiamen by our very own Uche Okoronkwo. Uche, a lot going on as we come down to the start of the summit in Xiamen. South Africa has just launched the headquarters of the BRICS New Development Bank. What does this mean for the continent?
That's right, Penina. Just about a week ago, South Africa launched the Africa Regional Center of the New Development Bank, which of course was formerly known as the BRICS Development Bank. Now, the bank is just about 2 years old now, but this new center is meant to be the face of the BRICS Bank on the African continent. And the hope is certainly that it will help accelerate Africa's huge infrastructure needs through its loan facility. Now, already it has committed about $1.5 billion towards South Africa's development projects. For the rest of the continent, however, the bank says it expects to start the process of considering new members, as well as finalizing the project pipeline for the second batch of loans, which of course will be offered in the 2017 and 2018 financial year. Now, the bank is targeting a total loan book of about $8 billion for around 35 projects by the end of 2018. Not just African countries are looking to tap into this. We've seen the African Development Bank has also invited the New Development Bank to support its Light Up and Power Africa project. Now, for Africa, this is certainly a new source of much needed funds for infrastructure development on the continent. How effective it will be as a credit facility remains to be seen. Penina?
And Uche, the idea of BRICS Plus has been floated. China is also inviting several non-member states to participate in this year's summit. What can we expect?
Well, Penina, the idea of BRICS Plus was floated earlier this year, and it involves a plan to expand BRICS to take in more influential emerging economies. Now, economies such as Indonesia, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Egypt, and even Pakistan have been highlighted. However, not much has been said about this idea just yet. We are expecting to get more substance on this during the upcoming meeting here in Xiamen. Now, interesting to note that some analysts do say that the idea of a BRICS expansion may not be that wise right now, as it might distract the group from its cooperation ideals and certainly make it harder to reach a consensus amongst them. Now, they also say it might dilute the BRICS' importance to the global economy right now. Now, earlier on, I spoke to Ali Khan Sachi, and he's the CEO of Rich Management, about just how important BRICS nations are to the global economy. Take a look. When you look at the changing dynamics globally, I mean, we can no longer rely on the US as a world power, and countries like China are picking up the slack. How do you think this will impact the BRICS summit?
I think most people agree with what you're saying, that the epicenter of political risk is now in Washington. And you know, the president in Washington can change the dynamics of global politics with one tweet, we found out. So certainly that's a correct characterization. And I think, you know, the UK as well has got serious challenges with Brexit. I don't think there's a majority in favor of it anymore. And you've got a very weak prime minister who could be toppled at any time. And so absolutely clear that that's the case. And I think what we've seen is China and Russia both stepping up to the plate in a very big way. You see that in a number of different situations.
There has been a lot of discussion about the value of this summit to South Africa as a member and to the continent as a whole. What are your thoughts?
I would take South Africa as a special situation. Under President Zuma, I think, you know, any objective observer has got to have issues with the direction of travel in South Africa. And I think South Africa essentially was the leader for sub-Saharan Africa, it is no longer. How BRICS now, remains the biggest economy, but in terms of political leadership, I think, East Africa is showing more leadership than President Zuma is. So I think that's going to be a challenge going forward as to how that is addressed. And the way I think, for a long time, South Africa was the gateway to Africa. You kicked off in Durban and you came up. Today, there are many different gateways. And I think what we're going to see is a bit of a dilution in South Africa's influence as the rest of Africa says, you know what, we want a voice too. How are you going to address that need? And I think we'll see that develop over the next few years.
Are you impressed with the progress the BRICS New Development Bank has made so far since its creation?
The money hasn't hit the ground in a big way. It is going to. So we're at that stage that people haven't felt it yet, but they are going to feel it because the agenda for the BRICS Bank is a South-South agenda. And where does Africa fall into that? It very much falls into that agenda. And I think what we have here is a capital deficit. What we have in places like China is a capital surplus. The returns in Africa are good. Therefore, I expect this bank to be putting a great deal of work, a great deal of money to work here.